Which means good.
Okay, all right.
So nothing bad.
All right.
Let's talk in the second part about these specialist courts. I know you've been critical to what happens there, or maybe the fact itself that they were created after,
Yes.
we've seen the Hague Tribunal acquitting Mr. Lima and Mr. Haradinaj. It was the case for all former Yugoslavia, in which Croatian, Bosnian, Serb generals were charged as well. So here the sentiment is that this is a big injustice against Kosovo Albanians there. It is, a lot of people call it just ethnic, racist actually, court, because it only deals with the alleged crimes of Albanians. How do you see this?
I'm also very concerned. I will confess, the whole process has been very, A, bizarre, and B, tainted. And it's tainted by the fact that the whole court was set up because of sensationalist allegations of organ harvesting by the KLA, which is, in my view, the only reason that it got international attention and the attention of members of the international community to finance this court, to set it up, to put pressure on Kosovo to pass a law setting up the specialist chambers, etc. All of it was related to Dick Marty's report and these, again, as I say, sensationalist headlines, pushed, as we know, mostly by Serbia and Russia for their own obvious propaganda reasons against Kosovo's independence, against the very existence of Kosovo. Unfortunately, Dick Marty appears to have bought those allegations and then sold them to the international community. The court has been set up, and as we know, nothing came of these sensationalist allegations. But now we have an international court set up under domestic law, but with international judges and prosecutors seated in The Hague, conducting investigations and prosecutions for what, frankly, in my opinion, are allegations that very easily could and should have been tried in Kosovo, if nothing else, in front of ULEX or other domestic jurisdictions. There is no reason that I see that there should be a special court set up in The Hague for the allegations that are currently contained in the indictments that have been filed. I do believe that there is a certain, I want to say, perception that has been created in terms of the court is, out of necessity, set up to try only Kosovo Albanians. The reason it's out of necessity is, as a practical matter, this is a court set up under Kosovo law. It will never be able to try, as a matter of fact, it will never be able to try Serbs for crimes committed in Kosovo, because obviously Serbia will protect its own officers. Kosovo cannot issue Interpol warrants to arrest people outside who are not on Kosovo territory. And so it's become a one-sided court because only Kosovo Albanians will be tried, which I think creates a very negative perception and creates a perception of a lack of impartiality and a lack of justice, because I think what happened in the Kosovo conflict in 1998 and 1999 is clear in terms of who started the war, who was responsible for the terrible suffering in that war, and who was defending themselves in that war, basically creating a defense out of nothing against Milosevic's regime. So that's one problem. And then the second problem is created by the fact that no Kosovo Albanians have been released on pretrial detention, from pretrial detention. That didn't even happen at the ICTY. The ICTY released all different ethnicities on pretrial release, including Kosovo Albanians. At the time at the ICTY, there was no perception or no justification offered that somehow Kosovo Albanians pose a threat to witnesses or will do other things like that. But unfortunately for this court, we are now more than 2 years into cases involving Kosovo Albanians, and not a single one has been found to be entitled to be released on detention pending trial.
And we're talking about high-level politicians, like including
Absolutely.
The former president and 2 former speakers and an MP.
Absolutely. And so all of that, I think, creates a very negative perception in the Kosovo public, and frankly, questions are being asked outside of Kosovo as well, internationally. Why do we have this court? What is the purpose? And is this really justified? Tens of millions of euros, if not more, are spent on a court that, again, in my opinion, I fail to see why EULEX exists in Kosovo to try war crimes cases, but cannot be found competent to try the cases that are currently pending in The Hague.
About the way the indictment was published, I know you were critical of that as well. I mean, as we know, President Thaci was traveling to U.S. when he just came back because the prosecutors went public months before actually, detaining Mr. Thaci and sending him to Hague.
Yes, I had never seen that before, that a prosecutor would announce that he had filed a request for the confirmation of an indictment. And I found it to be a highly unusual move that was evidently intended to sabotage a meeting between the president of Serbia, the president of Kosovo, and the president of the United States in Washington, D.C. And so to have an international prosecutor take that step in order to, as I said, I think it's fair to use the word sabotage, a high-level meeting that is intended, I think, to bring Serbia and Kosovo closer together towards some sort of a resolution of the long-standing dispute between the two, and then to not explain why precisely, what precisely the prosecutor thought was going to happen in Washington with the President of the United States that required him to intervene publicly in order to taint the President of Kosovo so that that meeting couldn't be held, I think should have been stated publicly. And so the entire release at the time, I was very critical of and still believe that it was not an appropriate maneuver by a prosecutor.
And what do you make of the indictment? The one that we know, I mean, it's public part of it, the names are redacted, but what do you make of the indictment against the four, including President Thaci, the big four?
Obviously, we are going to challenge the indictment, and we think it's unfounded, and we think that